war, Bill Blass returned to New York. He was very excited to continue this career that he had started very briefly with sketching for top companies there. But when he returned to the company he was working at previously, they told him they didn't want him back because he was too ambitious. Because at the time, were meant to be in the back room. They were supposed to show their work but not be seen or heard. And he really didn't like that. He really wanted to make a name for himself. He finally found a home at a company called Anna Miller. While at Anna Miller, Blass's designs were often called out by name in Women's Wear Daily. Here we see Blass again in a Women's Wear Daily article from 1956 with the lovely title, Man Arrived. And we have him holding a bolt of fabric there. This was very unusual at the time where not even a design of him is featured. He is the sole star. So again, this shows early on he really wanted to make a name for himself and not only his designs and link that connection between his suave appearance and his clothes. Anna Miller had a brother named Maurice Rentner. And eventually, in 1958, Anna Miller merged with his firm, and Bill Blass became the head designer for both of these companies. This was the first time that Bill Blass had the power to control all of the designs of these companies, and he quickly took Maurice Rentner from a company who was really, really struggling to a company who was the height of youth and couture. His name was first featured in a Vogue magazine on August 1st, 1960, for the design on the far right, which was credited to Bill Blass for Maurice Rentner. Bill Blass was also really instrumental in combining masculine elements of clothing into women's wear, which was very, very heightened proportions. It knit the women in at the waist and then it flared out, and that very feminine silhouette was very popular. Here he's featured with his model Babette, both wearing similar menswear-inspired clothing. This is an example of a label in one of these garments at the time. So, of course, Bill's name is on there, but the brand's name is still front and center and really big and bold. Bill Blass would not get his name solely on his label until 1970, when he was almost 50 years old. So in 1970, Blass finally bought out his partners at Maurice Rentner, and he launched Bill Blass Limited, which is still around today. At the time, he was designing 4 collections annually, as well as fur, scarves, rainwear, hosiery, luggage, watches, and menswear. And he was also at the label for 50 years, which is very, very rare for any designers. The turnover rate is very high. Here we see what a new label on Bill Blass's clothes look like. Again, it's just his name, so he finally had that. And we can also see the mirrored BB logo that you saw in his earlier sketchbook. He finally was able to implement that on some of his designs, which is very cool. Bill Blass was also a part of a group of American designers at the Battle of Versailles, if anybody has ever heard of that. This was a really important time in fashion, which ended up distinguishing New York and America as the center of fashion rather than Paris. And that was the first time in history that this has ever happened. So here we see Liza Minnelli, some other designers from Stephen Burrows, another designer to show, and Bill Blass's dress on the right there. This is a photo from the Bill Blass segment. These photos are very, very rare because there was a really strict press restriction at the time. Here we see an example of a Bill Blass scarf. Bill Blass was a businessman. That's how he made most of his money, actually, was through these merchandising endeavors that he went off of. So he made everything from watches to scarves, and he also made cars. So even though Bill Blass never learned to drive, he had 2 lines of Lincoln Continentals. You can see Bill Blass on the right there standing behind his car. Now we're getting into more clothing. This is an example from the 1980s. This was when women were going back to work as never before, and so he really latched onto that tailored, structured look that he was so known for and produced these suit ensembles in very smart ways. So here we see a suit that's actually made up of 3 different kinds of the same check fabric, just in different sizes. And you can even see on the right there, that coat is just kind of folded up a little bit so the lining is exposed, so you can see all 3 of those kind of working in tandem. Here's another example that's Matisse inspired. And even though Bill Blass himself said that he didn't consider himself an artist, he loved art, he collected antiques, he had a collection of art that he donated, most of it to the Metropolitan Museum after he passed away. But clearly this stuff was very important in his life, and he translated that into beautiful clothing. Here we have a dress worn by Hillary Clinton. He designed for a lot of first ladies. Nancy Reagan was one of his very favorite customers. And this dress was also in the exhibition. We see it on your right there on the runway, and then on her at a dinner in Tokyo in 1993. So Bill Blass was also credited by many to be the intersection of fashion and celebrity. He knew a lot of famous women at the time. This is a lovely cartoon sketch of him with 3 iconic women. We have Nancy Kissinger, Nan Kempner, and Pat Buckley fawning over him with his cigarette. We see him here with Nancy Reagan, and then there with the iconic Diana Vreeland right there as well, of course, smoking another cigarette. Just a few closing facts. The Bill Blass legacy. He was the owner and designer from 1970 to 2000, and of course worked in fashion for 20 plus years before that even. His final collection was September 1999. That's a photo from the final collection. Here's a list of his many awards. Not all of them even fit on that list, but you also might notice he has a Humanitarian Leadership Award and many other non-fashion related awards. Bill Blass is very generous. And these are just a few other final images from pieces that we've collected and people that we've talked to. These are actually both from Bill Blass's butler, Al McGlowan. And this shows him on the left there, kind of in his final years, a sketch done by one of his friends with his beloved dog, Barnaby. He very much loved his dogs. And this is kind of a side of Bill that he didn't like people to see. He liked people to see him with a cigarette, all dapper in his suits, but this is kind of more of what he would look like on a daily basis. And on the right there, you have photos of his Connecticut home and him in the woods with his dogs. So again, kind of an Indiana man at heart still, liked to be out in the woods way more than on 7th Avenue at a fashion show. So with that, we're closing.